Hi, I'm Jim Zogby. I'm recovering from a midwinter cold, and I want to welcome you to Viewpoint. Tonight we're going to discuss Islamophobia, immigration, and a range of civil liberties issues with Laura Murphy. She's director of the American Civil Liberties Union Washington Legislative Office. Then we're going to take a look at the new session of Congress. We're going to do that with Shane Dabril. He's a campaign reporter for the Hill newspaper. But first, as Coptic Christians in Egypt celebrate Christmas Holy Day tonight and tomorrow, churches are on high alert after a bomb attack in Egypt on Saturday that killed more than 20 people. It was the latest in a string of attacks against Christians in the Middle East and in Africa. To discuss this problem of violence against the Christian community in Egypt in particular, I want to welcome Michael Meunier. He's founder and chairman of the U.S. Copts Association. He's been head of the group since 1996. Thanks for joining us, Michael. And Merry Christmas.
Thank you for having me. Merry Christmas to you too.
And apparently, from what we're hearing, there has been no attack that we know of at this point, thank God, against any of the churches in Egypt. Is that right?
Right. So far, none. There was a report of a bomb that was found in the city of Meunier, south of Cairo, about 200 kilometers south of Cairo. St. Antonius Church was under the stairway of the church and was recovered. So thank God that didn't go off. Indications are it has also some nail screws and some bolts and stuff that was made of, the first bomb was made of. So we'll see what that leads to.
How do you rate at this point the security procedures that have been taken in response to the New Year's bombing that occurred? Have they been, to your expectation, have they been satisfactory?
Here or in Egypt?
In Egypt in particular,
we have the same concerns all over the world now since the attack. I think there is a high level of security so far. The question is, why wasn't that much security beforehand? Having had the Al-Qaeda of Iraq issuing a threat that was credible, was viewed to be credible 2-3 weeks prior to that. Churches like this church, there were 4 important churches in Alexandria that were identified. This was one of them, the church that was bombed. Nothing was done. Some other areas in Egypt had good security. They removed cars from around the churches and took some good measurement, like the city of Al-Qalyubiyya. It's a governorate actually. But the rest of the country was kind of asleep, and people didn't take that threat seriously, and that's unfortunate.
But you think they have stepped up since then?
Since then, they have stepped up, and I am hopeful that tonight will go without a hitch. But the threat is not just for tonight. It's an ongoing thing.
Tell me about the threats. The threats have continued. You shared with me some email and some handbill documents targeting both churches, institutions, and individuals. You yourself have been one of those targeted. You want to just talk a little about that?
Yes, there's a background where about 6 months ago, a Muslim intellect went on Al Jazeera and accused the church of, Coptic church, of hosting weapons inside the monasteries and inside the church, and of also keeping Muslim girls against their will in the monasteries, which is a pathetic accusation. This inflamed the general public in Egypt. People start demonstrating in front of mosques, demanding that they investigate the weapons inside monasteries, etc. And soon after, things got out of hand when Al-Qaeda in Iraq got involved in this and issued a direct threat to the Coptic church, to the Coptic Pope, listed every single church in Egypt and in key key countries outside of Egypt, and was it listed bomb-making material, their addresses, their phone number, everything. And subsequently, since I think June, they started putting up lists of Coptic activists. As you mentioned, I was on the first list, number 2 on the list, and then they keep moving up. Now they've had a list that included about 200 or 300 people. We don't know where this is going. We don't know how serious it is. We don't know. But obviously what happened on New Year's Eve just made everybody kind of step back and wonder about several issues. One, why did the Egyptian government allow the propagations of these accusations that there are weapons that inflamed the fanatics more, I guess, and caused this. This issue should have been dealt with, should have been investigated. I went on Egyptian TV and asked the general prosecutor to actually investigate these issues. And if they found weapons, they got to arrest somebody. Because we don't have weapons in monasteries, we definitely don't. But if somebody was to incite violence, they need to be held responsible, no matter how high they are in the religious establishment.
Now let me talk about the New Year's Eve bombing, because there have been attacks before, right. But this one seemed to shock the country, much in the way that the attack in Baghdad sort of created a deeper level of awareness about a much broader problem. I want to talk about two different reactions to that. One were the demonstrations that I saw by Copts. You and I talked about that. I was a bit troubled by using the cross as a weapon. I mean, that's not exactly the Christian thing to do. But there is a danger here that this could escalate with obviously an incited group that would carry out the violence, but then an angry reaction from the Coptic community, which, though small, is not that small. It's large enough to become a force of sorts.
13 million.
Especially among young people who would feel a deep sense of alienation. How dangerous is it that this could spin out of control and create a more serious problem in the country?
You bring up a very, very good point that, in fact, I was just on another Egyptian TV program before I came here with Dr. Farouk Albaz, well-renowned Arab scientist. Sure. And we talked about that was one specific point, which is what happened to the age between 20 and 30 years of the youth on both sides, because this is the group that knows more liberty than anybody else has known. Also volatile. On the Coptic side, they feel oppressed for a long time. And they've been on the streets, they've been stopping traffic, they've been doing things. But thank God that the incidents that you and I spoke of are isolated incidents. For the most part, this issue created some sort of a unity between Muslims and Christians on the streets. You see veiled women, you see clerks from the Islamic faith, the Christian faith. Everybody's on the streets, everybody's demonstrating for the past 4 or 5 days in over 20 cities, demanding an end to this. And the end to this is many ways of it. Give the Copts some rights, let them pray, let them build their churches freely. Let's have a unified law against discrimination in the country.
Any concern that this be used for political purposes by some other groups?
I don't have that concern. I think all Egypt right now is united behind this cause. I mean, it's unprecedented. Even schools are.
So you think the terrorists are being isolated by this?
Completely. On this end, the terrorists are isolated. The important part now is that the Egyptian government listens to the will of the people, that they take measured actions to remedy the situation.
Because we've seen actions here in the States where there have been tensions, excuse me, as well. In New Jersey, for example, there were press conferences between Muslims and Christians, and I've heard from someone tell me in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, there's a Coptic Christian church where a Muslim women's group is going to pray at the church that night, tonight, to protect the community. Same is happening in New Jersey, and I know in Egypt as well.
It's happening in London, it's happening in Egypt, it's happening in Australia, it's happening tomorrow in France.
Is there a sense that a reborn sense of Egyptian solidarity emerge out of this?
I think that's what we're all hoping for, is we see that everybody is kind of united, everybody sees where the problems are, and the government has seen these problems for the longest time and was kind of hesitant to take a step, maybe fearing that some fanatic elements of the populations will create a backlash, where right now nobody is fanatic. As I said on Egyptian TV, nobody's fanatic right now. Everybody is becoming an Egyptian. It's a reborn of the Egyptian identity, of the I am an Egyptian, not I'm a Muslim, not I'm a Christian, I'm an Egyptian thing. You see it on Facebook, you see it on the streets, you see it everywhere, and in masses. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of people going on the streets in different cities. So now is the time for the government to step in. Now is the time for the government to do some of the things that the Copts have been asking for, and the Muslims. I mean, mind you, that Muslims have been asking, Muslim intellects of Egypt have been asking for these rights. Just 3 days ago, Dr. Rifat al-Said, head of the Tagammu party, stood in the Egyptian House of Parliament and demanded that there would be a unified law for building the places of worship. Unfortunately, the head of the parliament reprimanded him for stating so. But this is actually what's happening right now, and the smart thing to do for the government is to move on and towards the will of the people.
If you'd like to join the conversation, let me put the numbers up on the screen. The numbers are 202-420-5667. These are new numbers, or 202-420-5730. We're going to put those up a little bit later, but I just wanted to give you the number now. There are deeper problems. You mentioned them, things the government ought to do. Let's talk about them. I know about the issue of the permission to build or even to repair, and the lack of representation. Talk, though, about the issues as you see them.
If you take the permission to build churches, Christians in Egypt today cannot build a church without having what's known as a presidential permit. That presidential permission only given after you pass through 10 steps called the Meunier decree steps that were put by the Ottoman Empire back in
hundreds of years,
160 years ago. Well, these steps are very, very tough to meet nowadays with the rising populations because, for example, you cannot have a church if you have a mosque within a mile, a kilo or whatever. If you cannot have a church if you have a cemetery for Muslims. You cannot have a church. So it's, as a result, we spend about 20 years to get a presidential permit to build a new church. Very, very...
Any easings on these at all?
No, not at all. You have cities completely, new cities coming up in the last 20 years don't have a church. You got to travel 10, 15 kilometers to go to church on many of these parts. The easing happened in the renovation of the churches. Talk about political representations. Copts make up about 14, 15, 16% of the populations. We have about 13 to 15 million Copts living in Egypt. This is the largest minority in the Middle East. Yeah. We only get represented by 1.5% in the parliament after the president actually steps in and appoints them. And why? Because there isn't a mechanism which we asked for is the election by list. It happened in Egypt before, and it gives everybody a chance, women, youth, all other political small groups, small political parties to be represented where you have a list and you go vote for the list. This way you cannot discriminate and say, I'm not going to elect this because he's Christian, I'm not going to elect this because she's a woman. You talk about education. Education in Egypt needs some reforming, especially at the young age. There are many material that are kind of contradictory to at least the Christian faith. Christian young children are forced to memorize passages from the Quran and to repeat them and be examined on them. Yeah. It's not fair.
Let me take a call from Cairo right now. Caller? Hello?
Yeah, hello?
Yes, your question.
Yes.
Your question?
Yes, hi. I'm calling from Cairo, Egypt. I just wanted to share a quick viewpoint from Egypt here that I'm Muslim myself, and first I'd like to say Merry Christmas to all Copts here. And I just went with a friend of mine to the mass here in Cairo. And just as Michael was saying, I think now there's this sense that we are all Egyptians and we are all united. So I think this is what we feel over here in Egypt. So. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that report from Cairo, and I appreciate that. Any comment?
This is actually the wonderful feelings that we're all experiencing. We're a lot of Muslims, a lot of my friends, everybody is going to churches to celebrate Mass. A lot of people came up with a lot of ideas to actually build a human shield around churches to protect it. That's what I'm saying. It's right now, it's about the government. It's not about the people anymore. Every time I talk to high-level officials in Egypt, I always get well, we're afraid because, we don't want this fanatic element of the populations to abuse us, making a drastic step. Well, now I don't think there's a fanatic element.
The time is right for change?
It's absolutely time is right for change and drastic change because these issues have been going on for a good long 20, 30 years. They're creating a group of Egyptians that are actually going more toward fanaticism on both sides. And if we don't treat these issues right now, you're going to come up with a good number of youth that are going to fight each other on the streets.
What's next for you?
I'm going to Cairo next week. We're going to try to work with political parties and party leaders there in opposition parties. We're going to try to create a movement that to force the Egyptian government, if they don't want to start looking at all the problems of all the Egyptian people. There are many, many problems, and they need to be addressed. I ask people to go on our website. We have a letter that a petition that we're asking people to sign that's going to be sent to the world leaders, copts.com, copts.com. We're going to put that petition up, and we want the free world to join us, and hopefully we can show that even outside of Egypt, just like it's happening in France and it's happening everywhere, people are actually just sick and tired of manipulating religion and using it for political gains.
Tell me about the political leadership, not the political, but the religious leadership in Egypt itself. They're wary of involvement in politics, and yet, and of getting engaged in a way that may become, put them in a compromised position. And speaking as somebody from America, where we like separation of church and state, I would think that would be a stance worthy of emulation. Comment on that, if you would.
Absolutely. I mean, we have said time and time again that we needed a mechanism to have political representation so the church cannot get involved in politics and does not have to defend or speak of the rights of the Copts. The church founding itself with nobody to represent it in the parliament. In fact, the president of Egypt just appointed some Christian guy to the parliament who's well known by all the Copts to be a guy who never spoke of the Coptic rights. So when you get someone who actually goes against the general assent and you put him as a representative in the parliament, you leave only the church leadership to go and speak on behalf of the people. And in turn, that also creates the sense that the church is meddling in politics. And the mosque is meddling in politics, which, as you mentioned, if we will take an example of what we have here in the U.S., it would be the optimum situation is to have politics dealt for by politicians, take church and mosque, keep religion in the church and in the mosque and in your heart, and go to pray and just forget the meddling of politics and state, but that is not what's happening.
Let me go to Dubai for a call. I know somebody from the UK has been trying to get through, but we've been missing you. Let's go to Dubai. Caller? Hello? Did we lose the Dubai caller? We lost the Dubai caller. I think that's all the time we've got left in this segment, but I thank you for joining us, Michael, and I hope and pray that the next couple days are as peaceful as we hope that they'll be. When we come back, I'm going to be talking with Laura Murphy of the American Civil Liberties Union, and we'll take more of your calls, so stay tuned.